Did you know knitting is supposed to be good for you? My name's Lucy Adlington. I'm a clothes historian with the History Wardrobe, and actually I have a bit of a confession to make. I'm not very good at knitting. This is it was going to be a scarf. I think I'll make it into a pencil case. And I actually only really turned to knitting, although my mother did teach me, during a long illness, and I needed something to pass the time, something that you could actually do on the sofa. So I took to learning squares, and I used the term squares in the widest possible sense, and I made a blanket. I just kept making it. It was a long illness. So today I'm going to give you a short talk about the idea of well-being and knitting. I'm not a knitter, as I've said, I'm a collector, so I'll be showing you some original and some replica garments from the History Wardrobe collection. It's all part of our live presentation, The Secret Life of Knitting. Come and see us when lockdown is over. So they say that knitting calms us, and there's a lot of science behind the idea that when you get into the flow of it, you have that mindfulness, that focus, but you're also switching on your parasympathetic nervous system. It's basically your off switch. You're relaxing and you focus, you repeat the motions. Do you find that? Except when you drop a stitch and have to repeat a row. But knitting is also used more specifically for patients with dementia. You'll perhaps have heard of twiddle muffs. And the idea is that the patient can use the different sensations, the different textures to feel grounded. And it's also comforting. Now, our first association with knitting might actually come just after birth. Premature babies are often given little squares. And the idea is that when they've nursed with their mother, with these squares, they're put back into incubators alone. The squares hold warmth and scent. So there's that sense of bonding, which is, of course, very calming, very comforting. And then perhaps we might have knitted cot blankets like these. So again, a sense of snugness, a sense of protection. When you're a little older, you might get a knitted teddy bear. Now this one, hello. He's from the 1950s, and he was knitted for a little lad called Phil. Phil is now a big lad, and he's so smart, isn't he? With a little sweater and little trousers. The moths have had a nibble at the back, always a problem with woolen goods. Now behind me I've got another teddy bear, and this is one of many knitted by a lady called Ivy Irene. And she knitted so many because they were to be sent to children who were refugees in war zones perhaps, or perhaps those who'd suffered in natural disasters. And the idea was to send blankets and to send gifts out. So cuddling a teddy bear would be that form of comfort. And talking of comfort, during wars of the 19th and 20th century, people back home would knit comforts for soldiers, sailors, airmen. So service personnel would enjoy not only something to keep them warm, but also that sense that you've not been forgotten at home. So I've got a picture here of women in a knit and natter group, and who knows what they're making. And a magazine here from the 1940s, making for soldiers, sailors and airmen. I'd just like to point out the women in the services needed their knitwear too. Chances are they did their own. So I'm going to show you a few, now these are replica items. Woolens don't survive very well, particularly if they've been through a war. So a replica, but they're all based on original patterns. So would you find this comforting? A chest protector. Did you wear one of these as a child? And then I've got, of course, you know what's coming. A balaclava helmet. And these socks, these are fabulous. I'd just like to point out I did not knit any of these. because then they'd look like dishcloths. These socks are made from a 1917 pattern. They're for servicemen in the First World War. Brilliant turning of the heel, I think you'll agree. And what are these? Now this is from an Edwardian pattern for comforts. Can you guess what they are? Go on. I'll put them on. I'll put them on. Just for you. Knee warmers. Genius. So we've got patterns in the collection for knee warmers, for body belts, body warmers and so on. It makes me think of, hang on, the 1980s. Leg warmers. Does that make you think of Flashdance? Brilliant. So what else have I got in here? Oh yes. Now, History Wardrobe, we're very lucky. We've got a lot of fans and they volunteered to knit these replica patterns, to knit them up, got a few more on show there, into garments for us. And I told one lady, I said, look, here's a World War II balaclava and you can knit it in any colour you like. And this is a brilliant garment for the topic of well-being, because it just makes me so happy to see it. She made it in rainbow colours. How about that? Wouldn't you love one of those in your Spitfire? Now you'll notice it's got little flaps and holes, except for, no it hasn't, because I've put it on inside out. There, right, we're going to try again. I bet this never happens to Lucy Worsley. Right, I've got it on. Now you can see ear holes, so if you're a radio operator, you can still hear clearly. And then there are press studs, and you can fasten the flaps down if you need your ears to be warm. But it's brilliant, isn't it? So, that's knitting for comforts. But knitwear also holds memories. And if you've been wondering why I am wearing this outrageous mohair sweater, well, it's one of the few things I have left from my youth. My mother knitted it, and this was back in the 1980s, as you can probably guess. And my mother and I, we didn't have the easiest relationship. Like many teenagers, I was pretty tempestuous. But her knitting this jumper was a kind of truce, really. So I've still got it, still love wearing it, and oh my goodness, it is itchy. Did you have a mohair sweater like that? Did you have a 1980s sweater with, I don't know if you can see, huge bat wings, this one. My mum also knitted this for me. And I tell you what, you can't get your sleeves in your coat with the big, never mind. Anyway, so there's that sense of knitting holding memories of my teenage years. But a jumper that's a little more supple and soft is this fabulous Fisherman's Gansey. Now it's actually in navy blue wool. Perhaps the light isn't picking that out. And the design on it is a Filey design. So that's the east coast of Yorkshire. And this was knitted by a lady called Anne for her husband. Now you'll be picturing a gnarly fisherman going out on the North Seas wrestling with wind and waves to bring the catch in. He was actually, bless him, he was a narrowboat enthusiast. But the Gansey was still well loved, well appreciated and slightly unravelled in places. So although, alas, Anne's husband is now dead, she had this jumper for the longest time for memories. Because knitting connects us. There's something so intimate, isn't there, about the idea of a hand-knitted jumper. Every stitch has been put on by someone who's thinking of you. And we all need connections, whether it's the knit and natter groups or the fact that now, under lockdown, so many people are turning to crafts and engaging over the internet to, well, pass the time, a lot of it, but also that mindfulness as well, and to do something useful. So that sense of connection brings me to this rather brilliant dress. I've got happy memories for this dress. This is a 1972 hand-knitted bridesmaid's dress. It comes from the wedding of a woman called Janet, and I'm showing you her wedding photo. She knitted the bride's dress, and then there was a team working on the dresses in moss stitch, really heavy, very 1970s. It's got a hood. You can't see. Now you can. So that's a happy memory. Knitting poignantly is something that can also have bittersweet memories. And if I show you now, I've got a knitting bag from the 1960s. And this belonged to a lady called Marjorie. And Marjorie was busy working on some knitting. Rustling in here, it's in here. She was making a little matinee jacket for her first grandchild, Grace. And unfortunately, while knitting, Marjorie got a diagnosis of cancer and she never lived to see Grace being born. But the love is still there, isn't it? But so poignant in the unfitted cardie. And that sense of love through knitwear comes in the next garment I'll show you. This is a replica. So it's not the original. This is a replica of a 1940s sweater. And the original was knitted by a grandmother for her little granddaughter, Christina. And Christina was a little Jewish girl who, during the Holocaust, was forced to go into hiding in the sewers underneath her home city in Poland. And every day she wore this sweater knitted by her grandmother. Her grandmother sadly was murdered along with other members of Christina's family, but the core family survived in the sewers. And Christina loved this sweater, and she said after the war, "I wore it constantly, and when I put it on, I felt as if I was receiving one of my grandmother's warm hugs." So whether you're knitting in garter stitch like me, a scarf, or whether you're perhaps trying something a little more elaborate, such as this baby shawl, or early 20th century here, a Shetland lace shawl, I hope that the knitting calms you. I hope that it creates something that will comfort the wearer. I hope that it will also have those memories. Memories bittersweet, who knows? And I also hope that you get that sense of well-being and connection from it. It's connecting you to generations of knitters who've gone before, and also to the millions of people worldwide who are I get to the end and I fluff it, who are wielding needles. Those people who are wielding needles now, everyone who is knitting worldwide during this lockdown. So I'm Lucy Adlington of History Wardrobe, and I'll see you for the next video.